Hi, everyone. My name is Crystal Anderson, and I'm very excited to welcome you all to Women in Interoperability. That's a bit of some information about me. I'm the Senior Director of Interoperability Initiatives at HIMSS, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to the Women in Interoperability education session. Just in terms of sound check, can you guys in the back, can you hear me? Okay, thanks so much. I know it's a noisy environment and really want to thank all of you for joining us today. We will be having a fourth presenter who will be joining us in just a moment. So just a little bit about who I am. I have the pleasure of working with an amazing team who helps support the Interoperability Showcase in which you are all sitting. So please be sure, if you haven't had a chance to take a tour yet, explore this environment. We are going to be going through a series of questions that we have preset, but we are open, I think, panel, to any questions that might arise. We just ask that you would definitely use the mic, as it is a loud environment, and we want to be able to hear from all of you. With that, I'm going to introduce Dee Dee Davis, who's next to me. Dee Dee Davis is the Vice President of Informatics, Conformance, and Interoperability at Sequoia Project. Who's familiar with Sequoia? Awesome. For about, I think this side of the room said they're not familiar. Dee Dee's going to tell you a little bit about what Sequoia is and her role in just a moment. Dee Dee has over 25 years of experience in the healthcare industry with an emphasis on implementation, development, and management of IT solutions and healthcare workflow requirements. As we talk a little bit about what interoperability means and what it means to our roles, that implementation and development is definitely going to be a key point, I think, that Dee Dee you'll remark on. I'm also joined on the panel by Christina Caraballo. Did I do it right? Caraballo. She did coach me before this, so thank you so much, Christina, for joining us. Christina is director at Audacious Inquiry. She's a thought leader who solves problems and is transforming healthcare by synergizing her passions for policy, innovation, interoperability, consumer engagement, access to information, and the adoption of health IT. Christina's mission is to transform healthcare, make a positive impact in the world, and improve communities at the local, national, and international levels. Super excited that our additional guest, who will be joining us shortly, is going to be Judy Murphy. Once Judy Murphy joins us, I'll be sure to tell you guys a little bit more about her, but she is the Chief Nursing Officer at IBM. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our panel. So I know we're all having a good time at HIMSS so far, and I've been at HIMSS I think since about 2006, and my first HIMSS conference was when I went. It was post-Katrina, and HIMSS was one of the first organizations who came back, some of you might remember, to New Orleans post-Katrina. And for me, it really meant a lot that this association would come in. We had some issues, there wasn't enough hotels, cabs were quite a challenge, but it really did touch me a lot that the organization was so willing to do that. So would you guys mind telling me about your first HIMSS conference? You don't have to say what year, but just tell me a little bit about your first HIMSS conference.
Sure. Again, I hope you can hear me okay. My name again is Dee Dee Davis.
Louder.
Hopefully you can hear me okay now. So mine dated back a little further. So my first HIMSS, and I will say the year because I have to support that 25 plus years. I actually started at HIMSS, the first show I went to was in 1995. So that's the year after I entered the vendor world. So I worked in the vendor space for 16 years, and I was one of the starting companies. It was only about 10,000 people at HIMSS back then. It was overwhelming, just like it is today. But it was great, and I learned a lot, and I actually got to experience a lot. The one thing I remember the most is I remember Bill Gates was there. I never got to meet him, but it was 1995. That was the first show I had ever went to.
So my first HIMSS was New Orleans in 2013. I remember going and we were chasing everybody down and talking about the blue button and what I thought needed to happen because I didn't think it was quite working like we wanted it to. And I remember, actually, Judy's not here, but I saw Judy and David Muntz walking. They thought they had escaped the conference, and I thought, now that's where I want to be. And so I ran really quickly, inserted myself in the middle of them, and started talking. David actually asked me for all my money at that point so that he could bail me out of jail later that week. But the really cool thing is, like, since that moment, he's actually become one of my mentors. And I think that's what the power of this conference is about being able to meet people, network, insert yourself into conversations and discussions. So that was my first experience.
That's so exciting. Bill Gates, though, I would have jumped on top of him.
I wish I'd got to meet him. Never have.
So this week, as you both mentioned, HIMSS conference can definitely be overwhelming, but it can be exciting too, right? And you have those cool opportunities to make new mentorships, new friends. I know for myself, I've definitely had some highs and lows, and they're not all around, food or anything like that. But for me, the highs have really been within the walls of the showcase. Seeing so many groups come together. We've had over, I think it's 121 different systems are in here, over 80 different organizations that are contributing to really interoperability. So what are some of the, maybe one high or low, or both, that you guys have had this week?
Well, the biggest high for me, I guess, has been the real approach. I mean, Sequoia, the company I work for, Sequoia Project, we're really a convener to try to make interoperability and deploy it for real across the industry. And I've been very encouraged because I've had so many of our members and even non-members coming to me saying, how can we improve this data quality? So it's no longer that there is no interoperability, it exists. Now we need to increase that data quality. We need to actually make it usable, make it semantically interoperable so that it can be machine digested, acted upon, and presented to those clinicians at the right place at the right time. So I'm really excited to actually see it, not only here in the showcase, but all across the floor. Everybody's very, very excited about it. And I actually attended our board meeting was actually on Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. So I started early then. And they've actually approached me wanting to take it to the next step and trying to figure out how to roll it out even further past our membership. So that's my biggest high so far.
So I love the HIMSS conference. I love running around and talking to people and meeting everybody. What I'm most excited about is some of the conversations I've had with kind of my consumer engagement posse, and saying, a lot of the things that we were talking about 5 years ago are happening now, and it's really exciting. Just this week, there was an announcement on social determinants of health. There's a new coding collaborative. We're starting to look at standards to incorporate social determinants of health. This is stuff that we've been talking about for years, and to see us actually start to take action and getting conversations happening about how we're going to support social determinants of health in practice that have been happening a long time, but how we're actually going to start thinking about how standards are incorporated as we move forward is really exciting to me.
Awesome.
Those are some good highs. Let's take a minute, because I think Judy did rush over, but she's still getting mic'd. Maybe tell us a little bit about, while Judy joins us in the stage. Judy who? Judy, are you mic'd?
Yes.
Does it on?
Is my mic on?
Yes.
Perfect. So a big thank you to Judy Murphy. We won't make her talk just yet because she had to run all the way over here. So
Oh, no, I can talk.
Okay.
Those of you who know me know I can always talk.
Okay, I don't know how to go back, but I'll read your bio for you. For those that don't know Judy Murphy, and thank you for joining us. Judy Murphy is Chief Nursing Officer at IBM Global Healthcare, where she is responsible for building relationships, expanding business across the healthcare industry. She serves as a strategic advisor to clients, puts together health IT solutions in order to improve health and healthcare, lower costs, and ease clinical workload. Prior to working at IBM, Judy was CNO and Deputy National Coordinator for Programs and Policies at the Office of the National Coordinator. And she's a tireless volunteer who has been involved in many aspects of organizational work, both at HIMSS and AMIA, which is the American Medical Informatics Association, serving on numerous committees as well as their board of directors. So thank you for joining us, Judy.
So I do have to explain. Those of you who know me know I'm usually pretty good about schedules, but I moved to the Midwest, and I put this on my calendar on Central Time. Yeah. And so, okay, it wasn't at 2:30, it was at 1:30. Do I have to say anything else? I apologize.
I will, by ways of intros, we had just gone through, and you were actually there for my first HIMSS conference. She saw me. I was schlepping all the way up and down New Orleans, and I think you even said, I don't know if that one's going to make it.
Can I, just a quick experience though. So my first conference was 1987. That was 2007. And I know I look pretty good for my age, but the interesting thing about this, I think, is that, we've all been doing this for a long time, and I know you're going to get into, how things have changed. And interoperability, of course, is one of those areas. It's unbelievable what we can do today. But as somebody said earlier this week, is still like maybe the end of the beginning, like we got a long way to go. So it'll be interesting as we evolve talking about everything else. But it was in Vegas, and there were 250 people, 1987.
Well, that's good. Thank you. We also just went through kind of a high and low from HIMSS19. So would you share with us either a high or a low that you've had?
Well, I hope I'm not repeating what you guys said. But so my absolute high was during the opening. Did anybody do the opening?
No.
Okay, good. When Chris Ross was on the stage. How many of you were there? Yeah, he was like phenomenal. And so Chris and I actually we know each other. We were on the Federal Advisory Committee together, and now he's at Mayo, and of course I live like not that far from him. But I was just so struck by how things in our lives change how we think about things. And so he was relaying how he thought these things were important in his IT department before he experienced cancer himself. Mm-hmm. And these are the things he sees as important now. And of course, you expect that to change personal things about your life. You don't always expect it to change things about the way you look at our industry. And I think that's what was so interesting for me, is how it changed how he looked at the industry and what was important. And he tied it directly to the theme of this conference, that we are all champions and we have to all contribute in our ways. And that was my high. I was just like sitting there, and I'm practically crying now because it was a powerful story for me. The low, I could just go on and on. No.
I think
I'll just stop with my feet.
Yes, that's perfect. Okay, and as I mentioned, for those of you that are joining, you're joining the Women in Interoperability panel, so thank you so much. This panel, is hosted in the Interoperability Showcase, and really pleased to have all you be a part of it. Each of you are engaged in this work from very different perspectives, from Sequoia, AI, IBM. Can you tell us a little bit about what interoperability means to you and how it's changed over the course of your career?
Yes.
I'll start with Dee Dee.
So interoperability is something that I actually first started focusing on in 1999, and I've wanted it since then, and it seems like we've only taken baby steps to get there, but we are starting to get there. And I can honestly say that one of the things about interoperability that I've found over the course of the years is that testing is key. And of course I'm going to say that because I'm a vice president for testing programs under Sequoia. But what we found is the reason we've had that success in many ways is because we've done that testing. We're holding everybody accountable to a certain level. I think that having the testing as a key and being able to make sure everybody can demonstrate that interoperability and actually show actual outcomes, actual improvements to care has been something I've actually seen over the course of the year, not only working as a vendor, but working here at HIMSS for a while, now working at the Sequoia Project. I've had the opportunity to actually see how it can make a difference, including in my own family's life. So I'm at the age now, unfortunately, where some of us are, where I'm actually a caregiver to my elderly parents. So it's one of those things that I'm actually starting to appreciate it more, and I'm educating them to get them to understand that they're okay to ask for this data, to understand. A lot of times people don't want to even understand what the problem is. So I think interoperability is hopefully going to help engage that patient, that consumer, to better understand what they can do to empower themselves.
To me, I think interoperability is really the foundation of the future of healthcare. I think that it's the highways, the plumbing that's really going to open the doors so that we can get into this new universe of health outside of just going to the traditional settings of care, going to the hospital to get fixed, but more engaging me as a person. When I think about interoperability when it comes to consumer engagement, a lot of people assume that I'm one of the pushers of percentages of consumers that log into view, download, and transmit their health data. But actually, for years, I've been saying I don't really care about that. What I want is 100% access to that data, and I want people to be educated on how they can access it so that people that want to use it can do it. And we can open this doors and universe to like new applications and approaches to healthcare so innovators can actually start acting on data, and we can move outside of just putting all of the burden on the providers and start including family members, social workers, kind of the whole ecosystem that is our healthcare.
Yeah, and then Judy, from your perspective, I know you've gone from provider to federal agency, now to vendor. Kind of, I'm sure it's changed a lot over the course of your career, but.
So, well, the first thing I'll say is I was at the federal government working for ONC when the Meaningful Use 2 rules came out, which had the interoperability specification requirement for CCDA and the early phases of what patients were expected to do. The view, download, and transmit. And I'm happy to say I'm still alive, because that was a tough time. That was a really tough time. This idea of beginning this data liquidity thing was crazy. I mean, people really didn't want to do it. And in many cases, they had barely finished their electronic health record implementation just to get the data for themselves, much less for thinking to share it with other people. But the consumer part was even bigger, because on the consumer side, you had to, I forget that initial criteria, I think you had to have 3 patients or something like that capable of doing it, because all you were supposed to have to do is the capability. It wasn't actually a utilization metric. And so what people were doing were, within an organization, they'd get their 5 or 10 IT people to do it. They'd check that the criteria was met, and it was, done and move on. You fast forward to today, I'm agreeing with this idea that I think consumers are some of the most important people that we think about with data liquidity, and the providers. It's not an or, it's an and. I just have to comment on those early days prior to the meaningful use criteria. Maybe some of you remember Blue Button. And there's people that are showing what they can do capable of Blue Button here. And that's kind of a cool idea when it came up 10 and 12 years ago when Blue Button was originally launched at the VA. So I'm excited to see that we're kind of hitting it from both sides. And the spawning of new companies that are creating capabilities for patients to download and then amalgamate their own information, I think is exciting, Now, does that solve all the problems? No. And, obviously, to your point, we have to have that for the providers too. But what excites me about the provider stuff is not just moving it all around, but starting to think about best practices and decision support that's sort of layered on top of it. And I'm sure we can get into that in maybe one of your subsequent questions.
Yeah, thank you. So we've tackled kind of the interoperability portion a little bit of this session. Now we also want to look at kind of the women in interoperability portion of this session. So, each of you comes from very different perspectives and different organizations, each different sizes. Oftentimes, I won't say often, when I've walked in some of the SDO rooms of standards development organizations, it looks very similar, right? Everybody looks at a certain way. And oftentimes we say that, having different opinions, different perspectives helps contribute to a larger goal, right? When it comes to interoperability, some of the things that you've seen within your organizations, can you comment on, the value of having different perspectives? And I know all of you have been kind of rolled up elbows and all these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, I can completely relate to this whole standards organizations. I was one of the first co-chairs within the Integrating the Healthcare Enterprise, IHE, that enables a lot of the vignettes that are in this showcase. I used to be the only woman in the room besides Joyce. She and I were the only two in the whole room. And I've now started seeing that grow with NHL7, with other standards organizations. I'm starting to see more women showing up. And I was reading an article just last week when I was making some notes about this presentation. And one of the things that I actually read about was startup companies. It's been proven that any of the startup companies that have a two-dimensional diversity actually make profits faster, and they actually expand the growth of their companies, usually by 70%. So I think that just isn't a testament that you do need both sides. Women are important, men are as well. There's been many men mentors to me. In fact, the reason I'm in healthcare, I can attribute to a male mentor. But I have to say that the two-dimensional aspect of it, especially now with the new consumer-driven type of interoperability needs, we're the caregivers. Women typically are. Not saying men can't. It's just typically that mothering, nurturing aspect of being a female is there. So I think we can help bring that perspective and help make it real in some cases.
Yeah, I think that just different points of view and diversity are important in everything. And if we have the same type of people just looking at standards, then we're missing so much. I remember kind of my first time sitting in a room mostly of men talking about standards, really kind of nervous and thinking to myself, this is way deep and technical. But I stopped everyone and said, I just don't understand what the goal is here. Like, what are we trying to achieve? And afterwards, these really awesome technical guys that I had a lot of respect for came up to me and said, we needed that perspective. We needed someone to pull us out of the weeds. Mm-hmm. So I've often inserted myself in these really difficult standards worlds in order to kind of take the broader view. And I don't need to be the most technical person. I need to understand how this technical standards are going to work to achieve our goals in general.
Yeah, and I mean, I love the idea that we're starting to migrate to a world where you can be the compassionate woman in the room. You can also be the technical woman in the room. You can also be the silent woman in the room. And that, I was saying this the other day, it's to me, it's the power of and instead of or. So like as a woman, you don't have to be assertive or compassionate. It can be and, right? And so it's taking the best of all the worlds and making sure that that's how you bring things forward. IBM, we're very lucky. There's been a diversity focus for over 20 years. We, of course, today have a female executive, and hopefully some of you were here 2 years ago when Ginny Rometty was on the stage, and you could see the kind of charisma that she has that, most of us would lust after. But again, it's an example of a powerful woman with charisma and this very interesting approach, right? She was, for those of you who saw her, she was very collegial and very, down to earth. Like she could have been talking to you, And so I think she and many others that went before her at IBM have had this big push toward making sure that we're always thinking about diversity and getting into the STEM programs and helping in high school programs and all those types of things to make sure that we have the most diverse workforce we can, because this is where and how that we grow, bringing the best of everything. And going back to my comment at the beginning with, what was my highlight, when I thought about Chris Ross on the stage, that's what I thought of. He wasn't he wasn't putting this aside and doing this either. It was bringing the best of both aspects of an individual that might have been traditionally female things and traditionally male things, but really combining it into being the best of the best. And I think that's what we all need to keep in our gun sights as we think about, our behavior, whether it's at a meeting or it's with colleagues, is how do we bring that best forward? Whether it's standards organizations or it's, I always said standards are great as long as somebody else is working on them. But I've come to realize how important they really are. I think we all have. And so contributing in different ways is going to be really important for all of us.
Yeah. So Bonnie illustrated a bit of IBM's approach to kind of leadership and the diversity approach. Would you, either of you, like to comment from Sequoia or AI?
Sure. I have to say, I count my blessings every day. I get to work for a rock star. Marianne Yeager is our CEO. She was involved at ONC.
Yep,
I'm
she
sure,
was.
Judy, you worked with her
Yep.
quite a bit. She is a breath of fresh air. She knows how to convene people, but she also knows how to get to your point, kind of to the real meat of it. Doesn't have to be technical, but you do have to make sure you align everyone. I think with her vision and helping also inspire me, we work well together that way. I think, not only that, but I have to say, and brag a little bit, Sequoia actually has 50% women and 50% men, exactly, right now at this point. We're going to be hiring 5 more people, so that may change, but we do actually have a good number of female on staff. So I think that's a little bit unusual. I've never really worked for a company that's actually had half and half like that, but we are a small company. So I think that, that's been a nice, inspiring part to me.
So when I think about audacious inquiry, this was stopped and paused on this question. And I've been in organizations where I felt like I needed to kind of say, where's the woman's voice? But the team I'm on now, I just feel like it's a collaboration. It's not even something that I think about. We often say in our walls that we have no dead weight. We all roll up our sleeves and we are on a mission. And it's just an environment of team building, support. I'm very blessed to be there, and I'm lucky to not think about it.
That's awesome. So thanks so much. So we've kind of gone through the getting to know you questions. So I hope you feel like you've got to know them a bit. And then our interoperability, and then interoperability in women. Now we do have about 25 minutes left or so, and I'd like to get more into the practical side, right? Kind of some information for our audience to take home. We're in the midst of a lot of things going on, in the news around Me Too. Medicine has one too that's now Me Too Medicine, Time's Up. There's countless hashtags that are really driving forward, the agenda of, a lot of both positive and negative consequences around inclusion. EY just put out another study that said it's going to take over 200 years to achieve gender parity. These are all issues that I feel strongly we can start tackling, but we have to do it together, right? For those of you that know me, know one of my favorite quotes is a Dr. Seuss quote, and it's, "Kid, you'll move mountains one day." And it really emphasizes the need for us to do this together. And so whether it's gender parity, Me Too, Time's Up, really think it's critical to do this together. One of the challenges, though, in doing this together is finding your network, finding your mentor. I think time and time again, people say, where do I start with my mentor? Who do I ask? How do I find one? So maybe if each of you can comment, Judy, you're definitely one of my mentors. Another mentor is Joyce Sensmeyer, who's sitting in the audience. I've been fortunate enough that I had to work with them every day, and I grabbed onto them. But, do you have any practical advice when it comes to that mentorship aspect of how people could start, or, anything to offer?
Yeah, one of the things I always tell folks when they say, what's the words of wisdom or what's some advice, I always remind them, don't be afraid of any mistakes you're making. Don't let the mistakes you make, because we all make mistakes and we will do them again. Don't let that bring you down. Learn from those mistakes, but also make sure to share those with others so that they don't relearn those same mistakes the hard way. So that's one thing I always do, because part of that's that communication part. The other part that I like to always tell people, and this is more that I guess I got inspired by my mom more, cherish what makes you uniquely you. Mm-hmm. What is it that makes you you? And cherish that and keep that at the heart all the time, because that will ground you in whatever environment, whatever circumstance, whatever situation you're put in. So those are the two things, I guess, that I use as kind of my words of wisdom that I pretty much preach to everyone most of the time.
Yeah, I think the authenticity piece is a great aspect. We held an event yesterday, a competition, and one of the judges remarked that authenticity definitely comes through with startups. So, yeah, Christina, any advice you have to mentors, mentees, how we can do this together?
Yeah, one of the things that I've always said to my mentees is that I can share my story, and help them discover theirs. But it's not a clear path. I can't just say, here's what I did, so you should do it too. I like to talk through it. And I feel like when I actually came to that conclusion when I was being mentored myself. And people kept telling me, what are you going to do? What's your plan? It's like, I don't know. Change the world. That's my plan. I don't know how I'm going to get there. But I realized that my flexibility in not having a plan was what led me to where I wanted to go. And so I've become very comfortable with that. And I tell my mentees often that it's a really difficult, and I know I'm really hard to work with, but we're going to get there. And I actually keep them and maintain them. And every mentee I've ever had I still talk to, and they tell me it's working. But probably a challenging approach, sorry.
But to build on those two, though, from the authenticity standpoint, that's you not having a plan, right?
Exactly.
Me, I have Post-its and plans galore, and Mari Greenberger's in the crowd as well, and she's also a planner, but that works for you, right? Back to that authenticity piece. So, Judy?
Yeah. So, it's such an interesting question because I think when we talk about mentorship, there's formal mentors, there's informal mentors. There's people, as I say, they're your secret mentors. So secret mentors are people that don't know you're their mentee, right? You're sort of like lurking and you're sort of following them, right? And we all have those too, by the way. Yeah. And so there's this kind of idea that you learn all the time about stuff. In the formal relationship, the plan helps. Whether it's a simple plan like be authentic or a more complicated, I can just imagine your sticky notes. And she's probably kicking herself for not texting me, sooner about coming, because she would have done that normally. But I think there's one thing that I'm really focused on, and it's for women specifically, because I think sometimes this continuum again. It's this or, right? If I'm going to be strong and I'm going to be successful, then I have to be assertive and I can't be always who I am. And there's this competition thing that starts up between women. And those of you in the audience who are women, you know what I'm talking about. It's sort of like this thing in here, like to be good, I have to be better. And in order to be better, I have to be better than somebody else. So I like to talk that through. I like to talk about that. Do you do that ever? And if you do, why and how and all that kind of stuff. And so she cheated on this question because the question said, what 3 words would you use?
Oh, they were?
Uh-huh. I look old, but I still have a decent memory.
Judy wants the plan.
I know. The funny thing, I do. That's why I identify with this. But I think I only had 2 words.
Okay, and let's tell them what that is. So, and we'll come back to these two as well.
Yeah.
So, what are the 3 words or pieces of wisdom or advice you would give? So, 3 words.
So, only 2. And I know, usually I
okay,
have a hard
two.
Be kind. And for me, that means whether you're the mentor in the relationship or the mentee in the relationship, be kind, but then carry that with you through your interactions. And I think if you stop and think, whether it's a work relationship or a personal relationship, if you stop and think about, I don't know, you could say putting yourself in the other person's shoes, or you could say, how is this going to be taken or accepted? If we think about how we're impacting other people, we may act differently. So it's a real simple thing. And I know that sounds like, again, a traditional female thing, but I think we don't always do that. So that's it for me.
And I would argue that some of the Western civilization forces that as more of a female push, where Eastern civilization, when you look at Buddhism, Taoism, all be kind, all centered. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So 2 or 3 words. Feel free to add an extra.
Well, I have to put 4. So be interested in others.
Oh, you can have one of mine.
There you go. I'll borrow yours. Be interested in others. I couldn't just say be interested in others. That didn't make sense. So be interested in others because they may teach you something as well. So be an active listener. Be interested in what they're trying to convey because they may actually enlighten you and inspire you. So those are, I had to do it 4, but I took her, sorry.
Well, I cut down my quote to meet the standards.
That's good. That's good.
So mine is be the change. And I think that this is in everything we do. And when I think specifically about mentoring and women's relationships, I don't like the cattiness that we've all experienced. So I just refuse to be a part of it. And constantly am kind to others and try to lead by example. I also believe that we should mentor one another and lift one another up. And as soon as I see the stuff I don't like, I just walk away. I don't like the toxic. But one of the things I'm working on right now in our local community with the HIMSS National Capital Area is actually filling a gap we see in the women's community, which is, we haven't completely launched it. We're in our early stages. But what we want to do is create a mentoring group for women that is for all stages of your career. Because often we focus on mentorships for young college kids, and really what we also need is mentors that are older and more advanced in their career, where you've hit a stop or you need to kind of just need a little more help. So kind of working to build that up in the process.
Yeah, I would say my word, building on that, I did one.
Oh, I love it.
It's learn, and it's really building on that, because I think there's, whether it's the sandwich generation where you're taking care of your parents and kids, or it's being in the mentee-mentor role, because I'm now asked to mentor people, and I still think of myself as a mentee, being in kind of that middle realm, and always the ability to learn and to continue to grow on it. For the audience, are there any, one or two words that anyone would like to shout out? Okay, you got to shout a lot louder. I thought I would be able to hear it. Be a team. That's a good one. Yeah. That's a good one. Be a team for sure. Give us one more. I'm going to pick on someone I know.
Uh-oh.
One more. Fearless. Thank you.
Also
That's a good one.
That's good, yeah.
Audacious. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yes. What does your lapel say?
Champions of Health. I can read it.
Champions of Health.
Of course.
Shameless plug.
Perfect. So we do have about 15 minutes left now. Want to just open it up to the audience to see if there's any questions that folks had, or panelists. I know you all haven't gotten a chance to meet each other in the past, so questions you might have for each other.
Well, I'm going to start, and I'm going to go back to a technical thing, just because we were talking about the other stuff last. How many people were surprised who were in the keynote that Anish Chopra brought up the direct standard? I mean, I was like, what? I didn't even know we were still doing that. And maybe we're not. I mean, that was part of what he was saying, is maybe we should be doing more of that. Was that an interesting thing to people? I mean, anybody real active in using the direct messaging for interoperability?
I can actually add a little bit. It has been more of a wave coming through. I know one of our customers, Sutter Health, Dr. Stephen Lane, actually has worked on a 360X project where they're actually using direct messaging to do that closed loop referral. So there is some renewed energy that I'm starting to see.
I mean, why not? If you're not getting the other stuff to work, that we know works.
So I am seeing some of that.
Foundation. That's another word. Such as IHE, good foundational standards and profiles. Okay, we have a cue.
Yeah, I love it.
I love a good cue, not a line.
Can you hear me? Okay, hi ladies. Thank you so much, first of all, for being here and giving us your insights on things. Very, very honored to have you guys here. My name is Susie Espinoza. I'm with Advent Health System. I'm the manager of regulatory and quality services for them. And one thing about Interop that always kind of hits a snag for me is health literacy in the community. We're talking a lot about making sure that we've got consumer engagement and the future of promoting interoperability and all the rules that are coming out now focus so much on having people have access to this information. But health literacy is still a huge barrier. And it's something that without, I think, a big push from people like us and from organizations like HIMSS and people involved in health IT, we can create all the solutions in the world that we want, but if we can't teach people what it is about their healthcare information that's important as opposed to irrelevant, because we're in this still kind of moving from that paternalistic model of doctor knows, patient doesn't, and now we're trying to get to the world of patient should know something so that they can be more engaged. Question to you then is, how do you see or how do you envision from your relative places of work, how do you envision health literacy becoming something that is, I guess, evolving or getting put out there to people so that they don't just have a bunch of data and information and they don't know what to do with it?
Yeah, health literacy becoming ubiquitous is what
Yes.
you're... Okay. I'll respond first from the HIMSS perspective. There's a couple opportunities. One is here in the Interoperability Showcase to plug it. Really, that's what we're accomplishing, is a lot of the use cases behind you are patient stories where they're enabling patient information to be shared, but then also acted upon. So it's one thing to have all this information, and as we heard from the rules earlier in this week, you're going to get all this data, but what are you going to do with it, right? Like acting upon it. Health literacy, though, is a totally different animal. It's understanding, the ability of what this means, why the immunizations are important, how you're going to get it. Even if it is all electronically available, if you don't have a cell phone to utilize it or to see it, I would say there's many projects that HIMSS is a part of, and we look forward to continuing to be a part of, but would really encourage folks to look at the different use cases that are here. We definitely have a long journey to go on that, but I think us acknowledging and realizing that it is an issue, it's definitely part of health disparities and social determinants of health, many things that we're looking to address, but would welcome you guys to respond as well.
I'll add real quickly, I had the pleasure of moderating one of the education sessions. I volunteer at HIMSS, still a volunteer. It was session number 95, awesome session, and it was Dignity Health, which is now Common Spirit. They just merged with a large healthcare organization. Breaking news, February 1st, they are now known as Common Spirit. They actually took on a project with SMART on Fire. How many people have heard of FIRE, that acronym? All right. They actually presented a wonderful use case where in 5 weeks, working with 2 vendors, they rolled out something that they termed Meducation. In the state of California, where they have a lot of their hospitals, there are 28 known languages that are common in that general area. So they actually took medication at discharge and made it a 1-page, what you should take it in the day to have a sun, in the night it'd have a moon, and it was literally a 1-pager with the instructions for the medication and all that legalese that they put in that big long packet thing that you get with your medication that you never read because it's so small you can't. They actually put it into 1-pager, and they actually innovated with that. So I was inspired that I'm starting to see people actually leveraging the standards to make some of that innovation and some of that information easily accessible.
So I find this area really interesting as well. And I'm going to take that, what you said, literacy, and just put it over here for a second, because for me, we're evolving. It's not going to we have to jump and patients are going to have to understand all this stuff by themselves, right? So in this evolution, we have this, team-based care. And the most important thing about team-based care is not that the nurse and the doctor and the dietitian and the PT and the pharmacist talk together. It's that they all talk with the patient. And so if I think about the evolution, it starts with collaborative care planning with the patient as a team so they understand the context of whatever information we're giving them, whether it's a med list or it's a go do this or don't do that or whatever, that they understand why those things are being done, and the context of whatever they need to understand is clear to them. And for me, that's the important part of the evolution, because they're never going to take a discharge summary, and understand every word of it, But when we think about this movement toward, life is about health and not about episodic visits to a doctor or a clinic or wherever, this transfer of, knowledge to understand what you're supposed to be doing in your life becomes extremely important, and it's what we're supposed to be doing as practitioners. It's no longer about that ICU visit, right? So I think in this evolution, we're going to get to better health literacy through this movement of getting them involved in their care and the discussion about the why of things. And that should really help that move.
So I know we have more questions, but I just want to build one thing on that. I think that I couldn't agree more. We have to make the data meaningful, and health literacy is extremely important. My theory is that if we can get the data and information out and really accessible, we're going to see the innovation community really come in and develop some of those really meaningful tools for people to engage with.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. My name's Pam Alexander, and I'm currently serving as interim CIO for ARUP Laboratories. We're a national reference laboratory. I've spent like some of you, I started my IT career in 1988. I've spent most of my career in system integration. So I'm really excited about interoperability. Like you said, though, it feels like we're just getting started. So my question is, have you seen any roadmaps that would better serve data needs for ancillary services like laboratory, pharmacy, radiology?
A roadmap for interoperability related to those
Interoperability,
concepts?
Yes.
So radiology is, again, back to the showcase, IHE is a linchpin. Radiology was one of their first domains. They definitely have a big pharmacy domain. Radiology through RSNA. I know Dee Dee works quite a bit with, Image Share?
Yeah, we do testing with RSNA for image exchange.
Yeah, I would say tying the ancillary services together in a big interoperability roadmap domain, I will defer to my panelists, but I would say domain by domain, definitely IHE and RSNA have established that.
Well, and just let me clarify a little bit. I do realize that most of the efforts have been around patient accessibility, and that's very important. But it's kind of the other direction, where the pharmacy or the radiologist or the lab may need information about a patient, but the patient doesn't present in their centers. So I'm talking about the other direction.
I know within HL7, I do participate in HL7, and it's a lot of techno geeks I know, but they do have a work group. You specifically mentioned reference labs. They have something called the Orders and Observations group, and that's what they're trying to do, is try to take in all of that community-based orders and observations and that whole, because when you place an order, you've also got to get the result back and make sure that information is flowing, but also making sure that whoever, when the order's entered, that any of that relevant information is available to that lab tech or whoever that needs to do what they need to do, or confirm that this has to be done. So they are starting to address that paradigm shift of the workflow for that kind of work. It is happening. The problem is when standards are created, I hate to say it, but it usually takes 5 to 10 years before that gets into real products. So it is happening, but you're not seeing it yet, but just baby steps. Remember that coin term, baby steps. It will get there. But by all means, make sure to ask. I'm happy to also help connect where all of this data is publicly available, so you can also weigh in if you'd like.
Thank you. Not to take too much time, but I do have a women's related question as well. So I think we're doing a good job as far as having good role models in our industries now and doing more mentoring. And most of the women's sessions that I've attended are focused there. However, there are certain industries, science, technology, engineering, math, where there's a pipeline problem. There's just not enough women interested in those subjects. So are any of you aware of any national programs to get women interested in those areas?
In STEM? Yes, there's several. Google Cloud is a supporter of the Developer Innovation Lab. That's another, if you guys walk out of here in Innovation Live, big proponent of Verizon. I'm sure IBM through their fellowship program definitely has quite a bit of STEM. I would say most of the foundations, big pharma, a lot of them too, have STEM development. I think Microsoft even just announced a big platform. I would be happy to talk to you afterwards. Definitely a lot of STEM money, and not just for women. I think their whole diversity campaigns, back to one of the questions that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
We have 3 minutes left, and Allison Berger is a volunteer extraordinaire who started here as a student volunteer and is now a nurse informaticist. So I will give her the last question.
Well, you know my name, and I've just started my journey on nursing informatics, and it took me a while to actually get my foot in the door. And you talked a lot about the mentorships and things like that. And for those that have unplanned or planned roadmaps of their career, how would you suggest getting, because there's so many topics out there, and I know I'm overwhelmed sometimes because I want to be involved in so much, but how do you really sort of focus a mentor or a mentoree, and give them everything they need so that they can focus on one thing and then evolve as they go? And I know I've walked the floors, tried to make good connections, but how do you really break into certain networking areas and realms to really get where you need to go?
So to repeat your question back, because
Yes.
it's super hard to hear, I think I heard 2 different questions. One is, how do you pick a specialization when there's everything that you're interested in? I know I'm one of those people that's like, ooh, 17 topics. So first of all, how do you specialize a little bit better when you're kind of earlier in your journey? And then the second is, how do you practically start networking?
Yeah, how do you break in? I know you can make networking connections and really get involved with certain things, but how do you really help make that leap so that you're really more involved and really there as someone who has something there, something like that? Yeah.
So I'm going to do the second one first, only because it's easier.
Yeah.
You volunteer, and it sounds like you've done that already. But the point being, you're not only on the committee, you're doing the real work. And maybe you've already done that too. But what you really want to do is show other people that you're willing to be part of that community. And people have asked me this over the years many, many, many times, how do you get to do all this? And it's like, you think that everybody just asks you to do stuff because, they see you in the hallway. No, they know what you're capable of doing because you've already demonstrated it in some way in a committee, or you volunteered to write that thing up, or you volunteered to be the note taker. So you kind of take those opportunities to show people what your capabilities really are, and then they're going to call on you the next time, and then when you can call on them. And that's how it really starts to build.
Yeah. I like to summarize it by saying, act like what you're doing is making a difference. And if you do that, you will start having that, I guess, that inspiration of your own. You'll inspire yourself, and others will see that. And to Judy's point, they'll start calling upon you more. It's very easy to be voluntold on things as well. So make sure that, keeping that as a passion, and making sure that as you act that you're making a difference, then you really are going to be making more of a difference.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the get involved. And I think, unfortunately, it's a little trial by error to kind of find what really gets you excited. So signing up for a lot of things and figuring out what you like the most, and then committing more and more time and actually doing it to those things. I realized this summer when I was kind of in between jobs how much volunteer work I did, and I did the same exercise myself because I was working a lot, not working. But I just personally looked at what matters most to me, and crazy enough, one of the things I love is my volunteer work with HIMSS. I always will pick something, and I love interoperability. So a technical guidance for interoperability work group is my thing right now. And I put time into it and energy, and that's very specific, but it took a while to get to that specific.
Which gets to your first question. Don't even think about trying to do everything. Now, You're clearly younger than me, so you probably have more capacity to do things, okay? But it's a classic female thing again. We don't know how to say no, so we say yes to everything, and then we get, not burnt out necessarily, but we're not doing everything to the best of our capability. And I'll admit, 2 years ago, I discovered how to say no. And let's just say I'm a card-carrying Medicare member. So, this is not an easy thing for us. But it's important to try to stop yourself.
Learn to say no.
Just like Christina said. And think, okay, I'm doing 10 things, it's too many, I'm going to cut it to 5. And pick the 5, or pick the 1, or pick that sub-focus, because you'll just, kill yourself trying to do it all.
Yeah, and I'll say from a specialization aspect, you know, again, back to my planning side is, you know, when you read articles that you find interesting, like I love genomics, I love precision medicine, having that information available. I don't think anything is cooler in the world. And so those are the keywords I lean towards. I like innovation, I like entrepreneurship. You know, those are the ones that I like to read articles about. And so when there's opportunities, you know, here at HIMSS, we did a new pitch competition. I really don't have any more hours in the day, but I easily signed up to tackle it. So I think you navigate towards what you like to read about, and then over time, that can hopefully translate into what your passion could be. And with that, I'll give you guys 10 seconds to say anything else, because we're definitely over time, but I took liberty with the stage.
Thank you all for coming. That's all I can say.
Same.
All
This
right.
has been great. Thank you for
Yeah.
listening, and all the head nodding and active listening
Yeah.
has been great.
Yeah, it's good feedback.
you.
Thank you. And I just want to do one more round of applause for all of you for coming.
Yes.
It is HIMSS has started this Women in Health IT role. We have 2 and hopefully another future Women in Health IT leader joining us on this stage. All of you, I encourage you to get involved in our Women in Health IT community. We have several awards, a lot of programs, so a round of applause for all of you. Thank you.